Oh, that got your attention. Yeah. All righty. Good morning, Notzel. How are you? All righty, excellent. Well, welcome to our 2024 spring meeting. I just have a few announcements and then we'll kick off our presentations. We'd like to start off our meeting first with our diversity statement and our land acknowledgement statement. Our diversity statement. As a local organization that strives to provide for the needs of all of our members, Notzel stands in support of BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, AAPI, Asian American and Pacific Islander, and LGBTQ plus lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, and other communities. While violence and intolerance against these communities have always been a systemic issue, the past years have brought to light particularly horrifying tragedies, including hate crimes against Asian Americans, the killing of Black Americans by police, discrimination against transgender adults and children, and other senseless acts of hate. As we look to the future, Notzel strives to learn from and support those who need us most by lifting the voices of marginalized communities, by inviting more diverse speakers in order to foster a more diverse organization. And please remember that once you attend a Notzel meeting, you are considered a member, and we value our members' ideas and input. We remain a dues-free organization that welcomes topics suggested and prioritized by our members. Our land acknowledgement statement. I would like to acknowledge the past, present, and future caretakers of this land. Northern Ohio is the ancestral lands of the Delaware, Shawnee, Wyandot, and other Great Lakes tribes. Following the Treaty of Greenville, these people were forcibly removed from this land. We invite you to learn more about the lands that you reside on. One resource for getting started is the Native Land app. And I believe that is on the bottom of our agenda today. You can find the URL. Okay. Thank you very much. Well, today is a great day. It's a little rainy, but it's a good day for community, for fellowship, for conversations. I've heard lots of them already, and I'm really energized by that. So it's nice that we can come together and have these events and share our knowledge with one another. So this morning, we have a couple of things to do, this morning. First off is our elections are open, okay? So every spring we hold elections for our board members, and this year we have a pretty full slate. On each of the tables is a list of the candidates for the position they're running, along with a bio and a statement, okay? You can feel free to read through that. And there is a sheet of paper with 2 QR codes on it. Okay, they're 2 different QR codes. The one that is green will lead you to the ballot. Okay, so you can use your device. If you don't have a cell phone or a device like that can scan a QR code, the URL is at the bottom there, the tiny URL. So you can go there, get to the ballot, and select who you would like as leaders for the Notzel organization for this next couple of years. Okay, thank you very much for all of the candidates that put their hat in the ring and are running for positions this year. We value all of our members, and so the past little while with our elections, we have made use of all of the candidates that have presented themselves to the electorate. So hopefully we'll be able to do something like that again this year. I hate to see good talent walk away. Okay. Alrighty. So as Nate mentioned earlier, the restrooms are down the hall where we walked in the building. If you parked out back in the executive area, there's also bathrooms downstairs, and around the corner down to the left or by the elevators, there's larger bathrooms there. And we'll be having lunch after the first presentation at 11:45. And I am thrilled that we have 3 great presentations today. First up is Patrick Connors from the Akron Public Library, and he's going to be talking about generative AI versus catalog librarian. And then we have Chloe Masorski, who's going to be talking to us about labels in the recipe box. And then finally, we will hear from Sandy Elwell and Libby McCune about picture book categories. Okay, so I'm really looking forward to it, and we have a lot of great fellowship today. We've got a lot of good food coming and out there. So please, also the food area is outside. Help yourself as whenever you like, and we'll go ahead and welcome Patrick up to the stage, and we'll get Patrick's presentation already, and then we'll go there in a second. Okay.
Hello, I'm Patrick. I'm from the Akron Public Library. I'm a catalog librarian there, and I'm going to talk to you about a little bit about AI, generative AI, and how we might be able to use it for our data in the catalog. Now, this has been a pretty big week for AI because both OpenAI and Google had big conferences where they announced their latest and greatest flagship models for their AI models. OpenAI announced GPT 4.0, and it's basically going to be taking on all kinds of different input, and from text to video, images, sound, and everything else, and be able to respond to it pretty much in real time. And they're going to be able to do it much cheaper than their previous model, which was just 4. And then Google is going to release Gemini 1.5, which is an upgrade to their current Gemini. And basically, Google's Gemini is just going to take over all of Google products. So the point being is that all of this AI stuff might seem a little bit distant from us right now, but I think it's going to start to creep up in a lot of our software. Copilot is already, well, Microsoft has Copilot, and they're already trying to get Copilot involved in the whole Office suite. And Google is trying to do the same thing for their Google Docs and Google Spreadsheets and Gmail. And they have a little assistant bot that can now be like a project manager during different meetings and all that sort of thing. They can take minute notes for you, and then you can ask questions to it. So that's a little bit of what we have to look forward to. But as for myself, see here. Aha. So how did I get it started with working with AI? My own introduction came when I was starting what I wanted to write my own program for trying to study some Japanese, and I decided to do it in Python. However, I never written any code before. Well, it's been a very long time. I've never written in Python. I've written in other languages. But basically, I just had ChatGPT do all the coding for me. It took about 4 days, and I was able to create a little program where I could quiz myself with some Japanese terms. So where did all this come from? The original Eliza conversational bot was more or less where the first chatbots came from. They were developed by MIT's Joseph Weizenbaum in the 1960s. Its key characteristics were mostly just pattern matching. It was really simple pattern matching. It really had no idea what people were actually saying, and it just relied on predefined templates and scripts. Today's generative AI does a lot more than that, though. So to define generative AI, We can say that it's a subset of artificial intelligence that focuses mostly on creating new content. It learns patterns from input and data and generates output that is similar but not identical to the data that it receives. Its applications are in fields such as art, music, text, and even drug discovery. We've seen a lot of it recently being discussed on the news, so I'm sure you've all been aware of some articles discussing its uses, and as well as some of its potential challenges. While it holds great potential, it can also have ethical implications, such as copyright issues that have come up on the data that it gets trained on, as well as ensuring control over what kind of content that it generates. Various different bots have been shut down in the past due to people trying to manipulate them and get not so good content out of them, I guess. Things that you wouldn't want your bot to say. So define an LLM for a single presentation. Well, Copilot did its best, but it gave me Legium Magister in Latin. This was really not what I wanted, so that was not the greatest start to AI here. Let's try that again. I meant large language model. Okay, so it's a type of artificial intelligence model designed to generate human-like text. I would have thought that it would have gotten that from the context and the questions I was asking before, but apparently it dropped the ball there. So training LLMs are trained on a large amount of text data that can generate responses or complete sentences based on the input they receive. While they're powerful, they also provide challenges in ensuring appropriateness of the generated content and dealing with biases in their training data. And yeah, biases in the training data is another thing that we've seen a lot in the news, but is a whole different kind of concept that we aren't really going to get into too much today. For catalog librarians, what can we do with generative AI? Well, we can automate some tasks, and we can use the content generations in order to help us improve our data quality, hopefully. And probably in the future, it'll be used to improve our searches. For more user interaction, I believe that the library in Toronto, I believe it was, that has a little chatbot that you can talk to. It wasn't very impressive when I was trying it, but they'll only get better. They could be used for data analysis, and Google is really focusing on this with their Google Gemini. They've got various different products where you can run through different kinds of spreadsheets, and it can do some pretty amazing things with data analysis and create graphs for you and break them up in different ways. And it can also be used for education and training. It can also write haikus if that's what you want to do. Cataloging uses for generative AI. So for us, I hope to show you how we can use it to extract text from images. It can be used for translation with greater context, as well as transliteration. It can be used for tidying up and fixing messy vendor data, and it can be used for basic subject analysis. So with extracting text from an image, I have this example. This is a DVD container where I wasn't able to find really anything on a Google search. It was for a set of these Iron Eagle films. This particular one just didn't really bring up anything. So in this example, I asked Google Gemini to extract the image from the text so that I could use it for summaries. And always remember your emojis there. You got to be polite. You can also use it for 505 fields in order to extract text for the table of contents, and you can actually show it the format in which you want it to extract, and so that way it'll just be a very simple copy and paste. I think I'll get into that later in the presentation, but that way you won't have to format it yourself. You can really just highlight the whole thing and copy and paste it. So in this example, we translate from image. This is a manga. It says something like seeing the same dream again, and the author is in the other corner. So assuming that we couldn't find this anywhere, then we'd be able to use Gemini, or I might prefer using Claude, but we'll get into that. So Google Gemini has, well, after I prompted it to extract the text and translate the text, it shows this as its output. So you can use any part of this for your mark record, and then you can make it you can make your record more accessible and get the information that you need from it. Maybe an advantage to using this over just using Google Translate is that you can actually ask questions to the language model, and you can get more details out of why it made its decisions that it did. You can learn something about what you're looking at. In this particular case, I asked it to break down the grammatical elements. And so that's just one of the advantages it has over just using Google Translate. In this example, I used it for a transliteration of a Korean name. And as you can see, it gave me lots of different options. So if I was using this for maybe a local authority, I might be able to include more than just one transliteration. That might be able to make it more accessible, or I could just use the one, but either way. In this example, it's I believe a Ukrainian name, and here we see the OCLC. Well, the authority file in the OCLC is down there in the blue text, and you can see that ChatGPT gave the correct transliteration that I wanted. It's not always going to give the right one because it might use a different table. You just have to ask. I would probably ask it to list them like I did in this one so that you have more to choose from. Yeah, it's important to ask around with different models because you might get slightly different responses when you're talking to Gemini than when you talk to GPT, and this slide shows that. They both translate the same way to he's a good guy deep inside, but they just chose slightly different words to do so. All right, so how can we use them to deal with data? In this example, we've got a vendor record that had, an RB Digital, and we've got some French here with some characters that didn't work out well. So Google Gemini is able to give us the right words that we wanted without having to know French or whatever language. I'm assuming that's what it was. So in this one, we've got HTML characters. Now, MarcEdit can also fix this. If you're looking to do this with MarcEdit, then you can also find a way to do it with that as well. But if you don't use MarcEdit, then you can use any of the models to tell you what these are. First of all, ChatGPT could tell me exactly what it is I'm looking at. And then it can also just fix it for me. Now we're going to get into a little bit of subject analysis, which is when a lot more supervision of the language model is required because, well, they don't always get it quite right, as we're going to see. So this is a very simple example, a book dealing with history, rhetoric, art, and debate, reaching as far back as ancient Greece or to contemporary times. And I'm pretty sure this was GPT, and it gives some pretty good options. Can't really go too wrong if you had nothing else to work with. But in this example, we're going to see on the top and the bottom one, they were just fine. The top one was on pockets and the history pockets and clothing and how they affected men's apparel and women's apparel. And then the bottom one is just a juvenile fiction book about a unicorn with self-confidence. But the middle one is the one that's going to be an issue because Chinese astrology is not really the term, it's astrology Chinese, and astrological aspects doesn't really exist. So the OCLC record shows us that they actually use zodiac, animals, folklore. So this is just a way of showing that you really can't trust them 100%, but it's interesting because if you give the model the same record about 20 different times, you'll probably get 20 different lists that'll be slightly the same. Sometimes it'll actually get the Chinese astrology correct, and sometimes it won't. If you really wanted to go into this and have your model do more of your subject analysis, then fine-tuning a model is possible, but that would take a considerable amount of time and expertise, but it could be done. Here's another example for Gardener at the End of the World. It was about a pandemic journal that combined the exploration of the natural world with reflections about how the pandemic alters global culture. ChatGPT seemed to think that it had something to do with plant viruses. And the OCLC record is on the other side, which is therapeutic uses for gardening, autobiography, human ecology. This was a rather challenging one for any model to get, so I really didn't expect it to get this entirely correct. Picking up on the autobiographical nature of it and the therapeutic uses for the subdivision was definitely going to be rather hit or miss. But you can kind of compare the other models here because Gemini 1.5 shows gardening psychological aspects, which is at least close. It did a little bit better. It doesn't have the plant viruses. Instead, it does actually have pandemic social aspects, as well as human-plant relationships. Claude 3 shows gardening autobiographies, so it probably came the closest to all of them. Pandemic social aspects, and it also got the human ecology as well as nature writing, which was interesting. So it turns out that some people think that if you the AI chatbots are better at math when they pretend to be Star Trek characters. So I decided to think, well, can they be better catalog librarians if they pretend to be Star Trek characters? So in this one, I said, pretend you're Spock from Star Trek. And I gave it the description to Stephen Hawkins, A Brief History of Time. And it says, as Spock, I would find the Library of Congress subject headings most logical for this book to include cosmology, physics, space and time, quantum theorem, and black holes. I was pretty happy that I got black holes astronomy correct, because sometimes it'll just do black holes, but it got it right this time. As far as the OCLC record for this one goes, it would just have cosmology in most of them, but that's all right. I did actually ask it to list them, not just to give one, so it kind of did what I told it to do. Tips for getting better responses: make sure you be clear and specific prompts. It will pretty much do what you tell it to do. Got some turkeys outside, in case you're interested. Provide contextual information, provide examples when possible. You want to make sure that you really understand the AI capabilities. Sometimes their training data only goes up to 2021, although I think with all of the new releases, like just this week, I'm pretty sure they go up to 2023 for both GPT-4o as well as Gemini 1.5. And always remember patience and iteration. A lot of what these language models rely on is a whole lot of iteration. So if it doesn't get it right the first time, just keep asking it. Make sure you tell it what it did wrong and ask it to do it again, or what it thought its directions were, so that you know why it did what it did, and then tell it, no, that's not quite right. Actually do it this way. So this leads us to more advice on how to get better prompting. Prompt engineering, also known as prompt design, is a technique used in artificial intelligence. It's used to optimize and fine-tune language models for specific tasks and desired outputs. It involves embedding the task description within the input, such as a question, rather than providing it explicitly. A meta prompt refers to a prompt which is a set of instructions for AI. It guides to generate the response to subsequent prompts. And I'm going to have an example of this in the next slide. So we already saw one example when we asked it to pretend that it was Spock. So that was an example of meta prompting. You could also say you are an expert cataloger, choose the Library of Congress subject headings for the summary. You can try, for these prompts, please write 520 summary fields as objective descriptions. Please remove any advertising language, and those are pretty common in vendor records. So I like to clear those up. And you can ask it to use bullet points to explain something in no more than 10 words. So a prompt template is a predefined structure that acts like a recipe for giving specific prompts to a large language model. These are reusable and efficient, allowing you to generate many related prompts with minimal effort. There's kind of two ways that you can ask one of these models to do something. There's zero-shot prompting, in which it purely relies on its own training, and you give it no examples, or you include no information that it wouldn't otherwise have. If I asked it to pick out kind of what restaurants I should go to in an area that I was going to on a vacation, but I didn't provide it with any information about myself, then that would be very much a zero shot, since it would have no existing knowledge of me. A few shot is when you give the model a few demonstrations of the task at hand, such as a few examples of the desired output. So in this example, I asked it to list all the states starting with M based on the format, based on the following format. So I showed it the format that I wanted. And I mean, maybe if you wanted to create a list in Sierra this way with states or something, I'm not entirely sure why this would be very useful, but at the very least, it shows how few prompting is done, as I gave it the one example in green, and then Gemini just produced the rest of them. For the following, so in this one, I asked it to create a slide with the following. So this was a prompt template in which I asked it to create a slide based on whatever prompt I gave it. Okay, so I gave it the prompt, a slide that explains in simple terms meta-prompting, and it came up with understanding meta-prompting, using a prompt to create better prompts, help refine and improve the quality of output. It's like giving instructions on how to give instructions. So all of this is important so that you can avoid AI hallucinations. So the AI models are trained with massive amount of data sets, but whenever they encounter a situation that they've never seen before, they try to fill in the gaps of information. And this is how you get AI hallucinations. They try to be creative, but really they just kind of expose limitations in their model's training, and you can get some really strange results. So these tasks are all good, but we might want to automate some of them. I started to think, well, I don't really want to copy and paste everything that I want into ChatGPT. So for that, we have the possibility of automating, such as in MarcEdit. If you're in MarcEdit and you go to automation, and this will be the only selection that you have, which is PowerShell. And in this case, I basically made a few different global updates into one PowerShell script. I asked the GPT if they could create a PowerShell script that would make all of the following changes to a MARC bibliographic record. I asked it to remove all fast headings, as well as any other thesaurus headings that we don't use. I asked it to remove subfield E's, subfield 1s. And then on the other side, we see that GPT said, certainly, here it is. And it was just a matter of copying and pasting that, basically, and changing a little bit. From here, we can also try to go into even more techie terms if we want to make use of the API. This is what you would use if you wanted to create a Python script that would handle these messages for you. And you could automate a whole series of tasks for it to, let's say, assign subject headings to a whole set of records by making use of the API calls. I set up a program to do that with RB Digital records. In this particular example, it processed 53 records. It assigned 219 subject headings, about 4 subject headings per record. And then I just go through the list and delete any that didn't work out. In this year, so my program does attempt to figure out which ones actually were and weren't actual subject headings. This shows that the 3 that were accepted were for this particular book, which was Birds of North America, were birds, bird watching, and ornithology. And you can see that that my program also rejected 4 that actually GPT suggested, but were not actually Library of Congress subject terms. I was also able to create something that helps me not overlay print records when I'm importing my RV digital records and I see a large number of overlays rather than checking each individually. I was able to work with GPT to create a program that figures out whether I'm going to be overlaying a print record or not, or an online record. This led me to create a Spock bot that was created for a Discord bot where team members can use it in order to complete some of the scripts that I have. Basically, they just enter in a command and Spock pretty much just sends the prompt template to any of the language models that I think are best suited for that particular task, and it takes care of all the work for them. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Patrick. Questions?
So, where are you going to go from here with your kind of research?
Well, I really hope to start to fine tune the model of my own so that I can have more reliable subject headings so that I have fewer that are rejected, so that it's only choosing actual authorized ones. It'll always be a little bit behind the Library of Congress subject headings because the data is not always going to be updated. It'll be up to the user or myself to keep updating the model. But I really hope to try that out at least.
Thinking about the extraction of data to create the book you release in the 505 field, as an example, have you played around much with having the AI also create information that would make that text usable?
Like the 50500?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've gotten it. Yeah, the question was about whether or not you can change it. So whenever you're extracting the text from the image for a table of contents, whether or not you could also make it a formatted field so that it has the 00 indicators and then it has a subfield T and the subfield R and all of that. And I was able to play around with that. I've only tried it once, but it did work when I tried it. I don't know whether I can actually. I'll attempt to show this. I'm not sure. I actually was this one.
Did you have it in chat?
No, I actually had it. I had it as probably just going to be content here. Okay. Well, you know what? I might just have to email you that if you want to see a example. I'm not sure if I'll actually be able to find the template here, but I do have a template a prompt template that shows it the format that I want, and then I only tried it once, but it's worked in that one trial so far. I do want to try it more, but I just didn't have enough resources that required a formatted contents field at the time. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure my email will probably be included when emails go out, right? So I could email you that template if you'd like. I mean, Yeah, so I could go back to that, and it would definitely be incredibly useful for that. Um, yeah, but so for this one, I kind of made it so what it's kind of just taking a natural language search rate here with what I gave it. And what I gave it was books on criticism for the works of Tolkien and Middle Earth. And then it gave what I think are a lot of perfectly good examples. Now, I don't know our catalog well enough to know whether or not there's better ones out there. And I only had it give so many responses. And if I wanted to increase the scope, then it could have given more. But in this example, I mean, the GBT is basically just taking that natural language and it just chooses keywords for them. And then it gives a keyword search on our own library page, on our own catalog. But there would actually be better ways of doing that as well. I don't actually have API access in our library, but if I did, then I could create a different kind of search. Maybe if you could work with closer with like an IT, then maybe you could get an even better search than this one. But yeah, it could definitely be used for that sort of thing. And I'm pretty sure that it pretty much already has been being used by a lot of the discovery layers. I think their recommendations pretty much use a lot of what it's already doing. Or if they aren't already, then they will be.
Is there anybody else that's looking at AI on this?
I haven't looked into it specifically with my stuff, but I know at my library they were also looking at chatbot use that like
Mhm.
the University of Toronto might have. I know
Mhm.
we implemented that at Miami.
Okay.
And they had a session on it and tried to like share what was going on. It definitely took like a lot of convincing to
Mhm.
let it happen, which was interesting. And I know our university is also just in general investigating AI,
Mhm.
whether it's related to students
Mhm.
or research. So like we're the really like beginnings of whether this is something we want to pursue or not.
I think a lot of places are at the investigating phase. So I was kind of hoping to get out ahead of the investigating phase a little bit to explore a little bit on my own to see what it's capable of. So that's a lot of the inspiration for creating this, some of the tools that I have. I would suggest that if anyone has interest in working with AI, then I kind of suggest choosing some fun project for yourself and just aiming that way to get started. For instance, if you wanted to I created a little blog that had it was for like Japanese language beginners. It has some very basic Japanese paragraphs and then it has a glossary afterwards. And I don't know what half of it says, but I just have GPT create it all. And it's just a little bit of fun to work with the model. The idea isn't to create some great blog or anything, it's just to learn how GPT does things. And yeah, I would suggest doing that. And I'd also suggest trying out different ones. I mean, everyone's talking about GPT, but there's also Gemini, and Claude 3 is actually really good at subject analysis and it's really good at programming and it's really good with images. I'd actually suggest using Claude 3 if you do want to do image text from images. I would suggest Claude 3 instead of any of the other ones. I think it's, oh, yeah, I guess I could just, yeah. So that's Claude. I suggest using Claude for images and programming. So right now, well, if you sign up for GPT, you can get, if you want to use the API, then you can get $5 in free credit for like 3 months. And I went through 3 months without using all of my free credit. And then my free credit expired, so I had to put in $10 or something. But if it depends on how much data, if you're working with a large amount of data and for fine tuning jobs, then it gets expensive. If you're using it pretty moderately like I am, then it's like $1 a day, less than $1. No, I mean a week. I didn't mean a day. It's been very cheap for myself. A large organization is going to have bigger costs, though.
Sounds pretty affordable for an
I think it is. Another question would be which model you're using, because GPT-4 is the most expensive one, as far as I know, from the GPT models. I use 3.5, and that one's pretty cheap. Yeah, well, like I said, I'd just start out with learning how to use them and communicate with them effectively. So I really would choose something that's maybe not job related, just hobby related, and just do something like that. And then the more you see what they can do, the more ideas that you might have for what you could do. And then you can just start testing things in small. I'd say have it do small things first and then work toward bigger things, rather than some laying out like some grand picture and trying and expecting it to do it all in one go. I'd say just start with small things and build from there.
I'm thinking like very early days. How to use it. While still finishing it. So a lot of what you do is transcription. That's a lot of what you're generating. Let's do that. And if I am, how much time do you spend correcting versus how much time would you have spent?
If I had to do all the correcting myself, then I would be spending more time correcting, but I've built in to my program to be able to do some of it for me. There's a tool called Suggest2 that Library of Congress provides that actually checks subject headings to see if they're actually correct. They're somewhere in the I never really like navigating their page because I can never find what I'm looking for, really. Rather ironically, I have everything on favorites also, so I never actually have to look for them, but here it is. Contact us about Technical Center. So they've got these services for actually searching and querying their metadata. And I never even knew that any of this existed until like 2 months ago. But but there's a way of using the Suggest2 tool to find out whether or not your subject heading actually exists or not. So I use that. It's not perfect, but it takes care of a lot of it for me. Other than that, I'm working on getting faster with it. And that's kind of why I want to work on fine tuning a model. If I can fine tune a model, then it'll be more accurate. There won't be as many misses. And so I won't hopefully have to spend as much time doing it.
So Margaret's question, right? Is this a time saver?
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
And so
First you have to get everything set up, and getting it set up, I mean, it was my big hobby, so I did it on the weekends. I mean, it's just kind of what I did after work. So, I mean, if you like doing it, then you want to do it anyway, but it is going to be extra work if that's not what you want to do. So,
but the overall net advantage was
it's adding some nice subject headings to things that otherwise just have the dot overdrive subjects and just aren't very helpful. Like history isn't a very good subject heading. So I think there's been some nice net gains.
Okay, so I'll try not to make this more of a comment than a question, but I'm just wondering about the sustainability of AI because just put the guy in the background. I've seen it's very, very demanding on resources to run these computations as in the background, and it's cheap right now for consumers to use ChatGPT and other programs, but investors are pouring tons and tons of money into these things like OpenAI. And I just wonder, once they run out of new data sets, train it on and run out of like all this background investment,
Mhm.
is it something that's A, going to be affordable, B, going to be just like sustainable energy consumption?
Well, as far as the investment goes, I don't think that's going anywhere. This is going to be an incredibly large market for a very long time, and everything's going to be. I mean, I think AI is going to start to come to. It's definitely going to start to take over Windows because Microsoft is already doing that with Copilot, and it's going to be taking over everything Google because they're doing that with Gemini and DeepMind. So it'll just be a matter of how the other players get a hold of the market. But could it become more expensive over time? Maybe. I don't know. I think right now it's getting cheaper. 4.0 is cheaper than 4.
I have a question. I was sitting in on a discussion group a while ago talking about AI, and some of their people had, I guess, like ethical concerns about like, well, I don't want anybody to know what I'm asking until I'm ready. Did you have any of those in the projects you were working on? Or because I think they had referenced something called like hugging chat, hugging face.
Hugging face, yeah. Yeah. Well, right now I'm just giving it kind of title and description is the only thing that GPT is seeing. So I don't really think there's too many privacy concerns with that. I wouldn't use it for anything like I certainly wouldn't use it for anything that wouldn't like go in an email or something. Like just leave out all personal data. Don't give it anything patron related. Be smart about it.
Any other questions? Right.
Okay. Uh-oh.
Patrick, fascinating. And I apologize. I do not know a whole lot about AI, so my questions may be dumb.
I'm sure they're fine.
So I apologize for that in advance. But you had mentioned the term bias in training, right? Bias in training. Is that the same thing as an AI hallucination?
It can be related. It's just a matter of gaps in its training which sometimes happens with the hallucination where it tries to make things up based on what it doesn't actually know. But for the biases, if you give it a whole lot of, like, let's say you only gave it RB digital records to learn from a cataloger perspective, and then so all it had was overdrive subjects, and then you asked it for subjects for whatever description you gave it, then it would only give you overdrive back because that's all it knows. So if it's not at all trained on, let's say, subject headings from the Homosaurus, then it's not going to give you any. So I'm kind of trying to work in other thesauruses too. Right now, I've only worked with Library of Congress subject headings, but I hope to kind of try to eliminate the bias or alleviate it a little bit by looking at other subjects, thesauruses.
So the bias is its lack in knowledge or training?
Yeah.
So say, I'm sorry, forgive me. I know so little about this. Say I have a shelf of books that I need to do original cataloging on, and I already have my OCLC templates, so titles and stuff like that are no problem. But maybe one of the places I struggle is assigning subject headings. So how would I do that?
Like just from step one?
Right, because I saw your input in your queries, right? But how does it know? Now I know that subject assignment is not an exact science, right? So there's always some subjectivity in it. But the way the subject headings are formed is either usually correct or incorrect.
Like with the right subfields and all that. It won't actually give the subfields. My program tries to do that as best as it can. I have a script that tries to format them correctly. And part of the way that it's stored on Library of Congress can help with that.
Okay.
But
so
yeah.
How does it learn the Library of Congress subject headings?
It was at some point trained on that. Just part of its initial data. Whenever they gave it its initial data to study all of the things on the internet. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I don't know whether it happened intentionally or not. I don't think they were thinking about libraries when they did it. They just needed data to train it with, and
So you don't point it to Library of Congress to a specific
I don't
set? it's already kind of crawled and trolled the world.
It already knows. It's way ahead of you.
So then it's probably looking into like the Gibbs, the Taurus, and the others as well. So that's interesting.
Wow. Yeah, and it probably, to be fair, like I was talking about the Homosaurus before, it is an open thesaurus, and I'm sure it probably does know that as well. It's just that there's probably not as many examples currently with it, and the more examples it has, then the more times that it'll go toward it. So that's another thing with the biases. If like more of its examples are in one direction, then that's what it'll favor.
So sorry, go ahead, Margaret.
Because I've been to a presentation of this was on AI generally. It was given not by a computer person, actually given by a person that teaches process.
Mhm.
So his entire focus was on what people are talking about. He cannot help but have inherent bias in our data structure. An example of that is the majority of the medical research has been done on men as opposed to women. And we aren't even aware of these biases in our structure. And of course, they're just going to show up again in AI. But the other thing he said that I thought interesting that I wanted to ask you is he said that you can't tell how it reaches the conclusion it reaches. So there's no way of checking the structure and function of the work that it's done. Do you find that was true as someone who's actually done this, Casper?
You can kind of prompt them to talk about the reasoning, but you don't really know why they're saying what they're saying about their reasoning, so you have to trust it. But yeah, you can say, like, give me 5 subject headings or Library of Congress subject headings, and also give me the rationale behind each of them and why you chose them. And then it just relies on trusting the AI that it's not deceiving you.
So there was a presentation probably here based on where the Library of Congress's that data that they had a bunch of mark records from and they found that it was assigning, lots of headings. They had a very, very lenient criteria that it's not even very successful on. They did end up needing to invest in something like that. It was really interesting. I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that sounds really similar to what I've basically done.
Are all of these that you use today, are they available on the web? And are they just web-based, or do you download anything?
So these models are available online. Claude, most of them, like GPT and Gemini, are both free for the chat purposes. If you wish to actually use their API, then you start to get into potential for costing some money. But you can just go to the OpenAI website to talk to GPT, and it's free now. And Claude 3 will cost, it'll give you so many free prompts per day, and then you'll have to pay.
Second question, have you attempted to use any of these products for analysis of your catalog? Maybe in structure Oracle BI requests or something like that?
So would that be like SQL requests or something like that? Yeah, I'd like to, but I don't have API access to my database, so I can't actually. But it was a thought that I had early on. I might be able to get that access at some point, but not yet. Mhm.
And I start asking myself to provide something kind of it would do it. The more questions I say, give me this from Salesforce instead of Library of Congress, it will start searching out more.
Well, the thing about GPT is it now has a memory of your conversations. And so it'll really kind of keep track of what you're telling it. And so if it sees that that's what you prefer, it should start using it. And this also means that when you first start using it, it might not be as accurate because it doesn't, you kind of have to like develop a relationship with the AI, which just gets even weirder. But but eventually it might get better at knowing what you wanted and what you didn't want and how you wanted it formatted and all that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's basically what it is. It's pretty much what it is. I'm gonna see if I can. You can also. So if I was logged in here, there would be a settings button here, and I highly recommend that if you're once you get signed in to go into the settings and you can kind of introduce yourself to ChatGPT and it'll hold certain information and you can tell it that you're a catalog librarian, you're interested in subject headings from these thesauruses, you do not want them from these other ones, and I don't know, whatever else you want to tell it. You can tell it what your favorite food is.
What do you call Gemini, Clyde, ChatGPT, whatever?
Models.
Models. Oh, okay, sorry. So how do you know a particular model has the data set that you're hoping to?
A lot of it's just trial and error. You just kind of use one and see if it works for what you want. I'd suggest using it many more times than just once, though, because kind of like, I mean, you have to get used to using it, and they all function a little bit different, and you kind of have to ask them the questions a little bit different for each individual one. So you kind of have to get used to them and give them like a trial period, and yeah, you can kind of figure out which ones do best with different things. Yeah. It'll probably always say yes. They're pretty confident when they answer questions.
well, that concerns me there because it seems like there's never there are gaps in its knowledge, right? That's what hallucinations are, and things. And it doesn't seem to ever come up with a null value where it doesn't know something. I would want a null value saying, okay,
yeah, it always just
trying to inject something in there that is, I mean, from an artistic point of view or a poetic point of view, that's
right.
Beautiful. And could probably do a lot of crazy things. But working with data sets, if I want a 0 in this field here, and it's doing its thing, and it doesn't come up with that 0, it has a gap in its knowledge, then it hallucinates on me, right? It throws something in there rather than saying, I don't know. I almost want an AI to say, I'm not sure.
If it doesn't know, then just don't do it. Just right. You'd be better off that way.
When you're asking, yeah, it will make up. That was one example that somebody was trying to research. Did it come out in court, or they were going to use it in court, but then they realized that it was made up.
Wow.
So I mean, you cannot rely on it to be.
Yeah, you.
I know faculty have seen it with fake citations, where it's a plausible amount of people in a plausible title in a plausible journal, but not something's just like not quite right. It's like the when a hand of 6 fingers and you're like, oh, it's
yeah.
Like, you just something feels off.
There was a time when I asked it to list movies that 2 actors were in who were never in 2 movies together, and it came up with not only a movie but also like the role that each of them were in. But yeah, you have to watch out. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I really do like Claude 3 for actually both images, and I like it for subjects, even though my program does use GPT just because I had the free API tokens for it. Now that those have expired, I was thinking about trying something else, but right now I just haven't made the change. I would also have to change my Python code as well. So that doesn't sound very appetizing right now. But maybe in the future, I might think about using a different one and playing around more. As far as like writing tasks, creative tasks, I think that Gemini is pretty good at maybe if you need emails drafted or something like that. I think Gemini is pretty good at creative tasks and writing. Hmm.
So that lack is a bias or hallucination. I wonder if that's actually a bias in the AI or a human bias.
Yeah,
Right.
what we've learned that we, you know, take only what.
Yeah.
So that's so important to remember that we don't have our biases.
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense.
So it's
Well, it's funny. The more and more I hear about it, I'm like split between the middle. I want to play with it, but then it's like, oh, I don't want to play with it.
I think that's how a lot of people are. And I mean, I figure that this is I think, a fairly harmless way of using it. I don't think that it's like it's one thing for facial recognition for the police to use or something like that. That could go out, like that could get bad pretty quick. But I don't know if subject headings. I want my subject headings to be right too, but it's not going to have quite the same impact.
Any final questions? I've got just one more. Sorry.
That's fine.
In the beginning, you said you use it a lot to fix data, right? And you even mentioned
I showed
at
that.
one point you asked it to create some regular expressions for you.
Mm.
The data that you've identified that you turn towards AI to correct, do you what is the form of those corrections? Are they consistent? So it can look for the patterns and run and do it. If it can do that, wonderful. That's kind of what I expect. But what about errors that you're looking to correct that are not consistent at all? They're kind of willy-nilly.
Yeah, that would really just take case by case basis and see what it kind of does. Uh, so it's I'm
Will it learn
always
as it goes through that process?
so it will eventually, but it's not like it happens all at once. They kind of collect the data and then they figure out what they want to train it on and what they don't.
So it's very
I
much
don't know
like
where that
human
went.
intelligence. It takes some time.
Here it is. Yeah, so for these ones, I mean, I'm not really sure why it knows what should have been there. And it did this with different languages too. It did this with German, and I'll assume that it'll do it with just about any other language that it's trained in.
There is an actual table because I was doing it by hand for some data because Sierra spit out nonsense to me, and my librarian wanted to put this data into a diversity audit program.
Okay.
Like, I can't do it if I can't read this title.
Yeah.
And so I was looking and I was like, oh well, the copyright symbol and a big A means this character specifically in English. Like,
okay.
That would make sense. That it would be like, oh, if you have those two characters, it's your Q in French or something.
I know it does kind of need enough to go on because I was trying it with just like individual names, and if it was just like a very short name, then it was really only like 3 characters next to each other. Then it's like, well, I don't really know what you're showing me. So it does need enough to go off of in order to see that there's a pattern and match it up.
Any last questions? A couple more. Patrick, that was wonderful. Thank you. In the recipe box. Could that be a little louder? I'm not sure we heard that. You're right. All right. Okay, we will set this up and be just a second. Ladies and gentlemen, Chloe.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chloe Mazorski. I am the cataloging librarian at the Cleveland Museum of Art in Cleveland, Ohio. At the Ingalls Library at the Cleveland Museum of Art. I want to start this off with just an acknowledgement. I have been very sick for the past couple days, past couple of weeks. So I'm going to do my best. I hope everything makes sense that I'm going to be describing. Please give me a little bit of grace and patience. And if I say something that doesn't make sense, please blame my cold medicine and not me. Appreciate it. All right. So, I'm going to be presenting labels in the recipe box, considerations for physical and digital access. This meeting's theme of successful recipes for patron access reminded me of this recipe box pictured here that my mom kept on the counter in our kitchen for all of my childhood. And so I was thinking about how we actually used the recipe box and mostly to store recipes for meatloaf or a tuna noodle casserole. And if you look, does this have a laser pointer? How do I do that? Yeah, so if you look here, there's some pre-coordinated categories that we have available to us. And I guess that tuna noodle fits with fish and poultry, and I guess that meatloaf goes in meats and stews, but they're not quite the best categories, in my opinion, and in her opinion, to organize these things. So today I'm going to be talking about some materials at the Ingalls Library at the Cleveland Museum of Art that fall into this weird kind of not quite right for any of the pre-coordinated categories we have available for them. And I hope you will also give me grace and patience. There are a lot of food and recipe metaphors in here. I'm sure they'll get annoying when we get to the end, but like if you can pity laugh for me, I would appreciate it. All right. Moving right along. So first I want to highlight that this work was done in Cleveland, Ohio, which is the ancestral land of many indigenous peoples, including the Seneca Nation, from which the state of Ohio gets its name. While many of these people were forcibly removed from the land in the 17 and 1800s, I also recognize the indigenous populations that live in the Cleveland area today. If you're interested in learning more, I just included my institution's land acknowledgement that was done in a group effort with some local indigenous folks. I'm also happy to see that Knoxville still has the land acknowledgement that I helped write. Very happy to see that still here. All right, moving along now that we're set in our place. So this is a brief outline of what I'm going to be discussing today. What's in our recipe box? So what I'm going to be talking about is our photo book collection at the Ingalls Library, and then some subsets within that collection. So first of all, we'll be talking about what photo books are and how they're used. Then I'm going to go into our collections of Black and LGBTQ photo books and the different digital and physical choices that we make when we're describing these items and we're processing these items to ensure and increase patron access. And the Ingalls Library is a small-ish, it's a large art library, but it's a small-ish library compared to some universities. So not everything I say is going to be directly applicable, but I hope that there's bits and pieces that you can pull out or that it's at least interesting. Okay. So soups and salads are our starters. So we want to start off with, what is a photo book? And I have a definition from the Getty Art and Architecture Thesaurus on the screen. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I highlighted some areas that I think are key here. So a photo book has essential information conveyed through a collection of images, and you need to view them in context because they're parts of a larger whole. So, like, ingredients are only useful in the larger whole of a meal. The Ingalls Library is the library for the Cleveland Museum of Art, so our first collecting priority is our curators. And so this photo book collection is to benefit our photography curator. We have approximately 2,000 photo books in our collection, which is a small sliver of the almost 20,000 titles that we have relating to photographs in photography. Also, this measurement is only as clear as the metadata that we have, which of course isn't perfect. We have such a large collection of books on and about photography to support that curatorial department at the museum. Our items are occasionally on display in exhibitions, so that affects the way that we view our books as more of like an art object than just a book, just the words and the physicality of it. We'd view it slightly differently. And so that affects how they're processed and treated differently than other materials in our collection. So within our 2,000 photo books, we have a narrower little scope here of our aperture photo books. And I fact-checked this with Anne Trenholm because she was at the Ingalls Library when this kind of started. So our curator of photography came to the library and let us know about this award that's offered every year in Paris called the Paris Photo Aperture Foundation Photo Books Award, which is such a long title. And I'm going to say it a few times, so like, bear with me, but that's what it's called. It's French. They can do that. So our curator asked us to prioritize collecting all of the books that were nominated for these awards, and then especially the ones that won the awards because they were clearly important, clearly something that we wanted to have to show what photography is and can be. And we love it when people tell us that we want stuff. Like, I was at a university library for a while. My faculty never talked to me. This is amazing. Somebody told us they wanted something. All right. So within this award, there are 3 categories. One for first photo book for new artists, photo book of the year, and then photography catalog of the year. And then some years also have a juror's special mention award, and those are sometimes themed. So in 2022, there was a juror's special mention photo books for Ukraine to highlight the war in Ukraine. Sorry. And then others, like the 2018 awards, highlighted the Me Too movement with the juror's special mention. So they try to be topical occasionally. So we know that they're important because they won these awards. We also know that photo books tend to be printed in limited runs. So, not like a standard academic text where it might be reprinted and new editions put out. Like, there will be maybe 500 of them, and we need to get them while it's in print because we don't want to pay the price later when we're getting it from a rare vendor. And I mentioned that we view our photo books as art objects because they're used in exhibitions occasionally. So we don't, because they're likely to become rare, because we might want to display them or use them in a different way than a traditional book, we treat them with this workflow that we call process as rare, which I'll talk about a little bit as we go on. One of my coworkers also called them medium rares, which I think is fun. All right, so given these caveats, we have some additional metadata and physical processing concerns because we want to be able to easily transfer these items into our rare collections if they meet certain criteria down the line, which they will if they are not reprinted. All right. Holding this upside down. Okay, so I wanted to just show you one of these photo books. This is one of the jurors special mention photo books for Ukraine. And just to highlight how much of an art object these materials can be. So this was created, it's called Loss. It was created by Katya Matilova. And there are 9 copies in the world. We have one. I don't remember which number ours is, but it's one of 9. If you can see over here, this is a image of the cover. It is all hand embroidered. This is leather. The book is hand bound. And then over here is some images from it laying flat. This is one side, this is another. Images in Ukraine as the war was happening. I believe that we purchased it from her when she had moved to the Netherlands for safety. So we're in communication with her directly to get one of these 9 items. It's really special. And here's another image, just a flat lay from inside the book. I want to give you all just a moment or two to spend with it, to read the text if you can. It's a little small for folks in the back, and to just look at that image if you can see it from where you are. I just want to give us a minute or two, and I'm going to get a sip of water. Ooh, fancy. Okay, hope everybody got to see it as much as you can. I'm going to move on now. So in addition to our books being on display, another way that we've used our photo books is for slow looking programming in the library, which is similar to what we just did with the image from Lost that I just showed. So this is a little snippet from a director's fellowship that we had over the summer. We had a student named Mario Martinez come in, and he was looking at our Black photo books collection, which I'll get into more detail a little bit later. He was looking at what books we currently had, what we could purchase to fill gaps, but then also what kind of programming we could do with these materials. And so he invited a bunch of museum staff to meet in our seminar room and to do some slow looking exercises with our photo books. And just to explain that a bit, if you're not familiar, according to the Tate Britain, most visitors to art galleries and museums only spend about 8 seconds looking at an artwork. So slow looking is a concept that invites a person to spend a little more time with that artwork and get to know it on their own terms without any mediation from a curator or another individual telling them what to think or what to feel about the art. So it allows people to make their own connections with the art and their own interpretations. So Mario used these photo books to introduce this concept to our staff. And so that's another reason that we wouldn't want to adhere labels or barcodes or anything directly onto the book where it could interfere with the images and could interfere with the context. So that's our grounding of the situation. Now we're moving into metadata land. So we've got our ingredients, we've got the mise en place. Now it's time to cook. So let's cook. I'm sorry, it's not going to stop. This is a screenshot from our discovery layer of one of the Paris Photo Aperture Foundation Photo Book Awards. And this one was a nominee for Photo Book of the Year in 2013. So we have quite a long run of them. Sorry, trying to get my place. Okay. So you'll see that that note is highlighted there as a Cleveland Museum of Art note. And so that's one of the ways that we have a controlled vocabulary, I'm sorry, for how we describe these so that we could pull them all out by searching for that note. This is the final project, but let's see what the recipe is that got us here. Okay, so this is system specific. Your mileage may vary. We're also not in a consortium, so differences there. But these are screenshots from the back end of our system. We use OCLC, WMS, or World Share Management Services. So in our case, we have to use the master record that's in WorldCat or WorldShare as our bib record. So you'll see in the, oh, I keep forgetting I have a thingy. Okay, up here, this is a snip of a mark field in the master bib record, a 586 awards note that lists out that award that it was nominated for. And so we will add that note if it's not present already in the bib record. If it's there in a 500, I'll leave it. But if it's not present at all, we'll add a 586 for awards note. However, our system doesn't display 586s, and we don't have the same level of control and configuration that other discovery layers and library systems have. So we have a little bit of a workaround. We have, oops, sorry, I said that really loud too. Okay, so this here, this LBD, this is our local bibliographic data. So that's where we put any information that is truly unique to our copy of a resource, our item of the work, if we're still in WEMI land. And so you'll see in there that we have our note again in a 500 because this is what actually gets it to populate in the discovery layer. And then you'll see also we've got a 590 that this library copy is number 75 out of 500. So like I mentioned before, they're limited runs. They will become rare eventually. Okay. Now, out of the Aperture photo books comes the Black Photo Books Project. So, in the wake of the murder of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020, the Ingalls Library was thinking about ways that we could meaningfully recommit to the museum's larger DEI initiatives in our 2018 strategic plan. At the same time in 2020, the Photo Book Review, which is part of Aperture Magazine, which is the people that puts out the awards, did a survey of photo books by Black artists. And so the same photography curator that originally told us we should be getting these photo books came back to us with this edition of the magazine and was like, we need everything in here. We're like, great, fabulous, let's do that. But we decided we didn't want to just do that one purchase and then move on from it and think, great, we've solved it. Our collection is diverse. We never have to do anything again. We wanted to use that as a foundation and then continue actively seeking out works by Black photographers to keep building on that foundation. Um, you'll see on the screen I have a tiny URL and also a QR code that will take you to searching our collection for these materials. I'll give folks a minute if you want to play along at your seats. Otherwise, I'm going to hop over and try to do a little bit of a live demo. So bear with me again with the tech. Working on it. Okay, cool. I'm going to make you help me do this a couple times, so I'm sorry in advance. I also have just a screenshot if this is too annoying. Okay, cool. It gets really quiet up here when I'm not talking. I'm lonely, guys. Yep, cool. All right, so maybe I won't do this for the next one, but we'll do it for this one. So what you can see at the top there is that it's the tiny URL or that QR code searches this long search query, but it's basically just doing this uniform title search for Black Photo Books Project. And you can see that we have about 143 total books here. Do a quick scroll just to show what some of those look like. This was a fun one on Black rodeos. So let's pick a random one to go into. So click into the title. You'll see here this uniform title of Black Photo Books Project is highlighted because that's what we're searching for. And then you'll also see all the subjects here. We let a lot of subjects display, so LCSH, the genre form terms, art and architecture thesaurus. But what I want to show you is all the way down here, we have a locally assigned term, Black Photo Books. If I click it, it will expand beyond what was in our first search with that uniform title. Now it's showing 298 titles. So not everything in here is going to be part of the Black Photo Books project. Like I don't believe this one is. This is just a book that we had already had purchased, so you don't see the universal title. But this is also a handy local subject that we made because we wanted folks to be able to look at all photo books that were created by Black photographers. And you might know that it's kind of difficult to do that if it's a book like just by one singular Black photographer like Zanel Muhole. You would just need to know that they are a Black person and go out and search for that person. We decided to do it this way. We could have also used something like Library of Congress Demographic Group Terms or LCDGT, but that's another thing that our discovery layer and our catalog just cannot handle. So our little workaround. A lot of the things that I do, like there's probably better real ways to do it in Mark or in any of our systems, but I like an easy way that our patrons can understand, and then we don't have to teach them about a whole new searching sort of situation. So that, I'm sorry that it took that long to switch because I want to switch back. Yes, please. I won't switch out for the next one. You can play along at home if you want. Yeah, I'm good. Nah, it's fine. Okay, back here. All right. Oop, let me move the mouse so it's out of the way because that'll annoy me. Okay, fabulous. So we saw how all that displayed on the front end. So I just wanted to show you another peek at the recipe behind the scenes to show what's causing that to display. So we have a 690 subfield 7 or second indicator 7, subfield 2 local for the local subject heading we invented. And then this 799 Black Photo Books project is a uniform title that we decided to use like as a collection title so that we could group everything together for easier reporting and also make it easier for our patrons if they wanted to be able to see everything that we had purchased because this collection has been of interest to folks. All right. Now, a quick foray into physical processing choices that I don't have a good food or recipe metaphor for. Maybe this is the plating of the meal. That's as close as I got. Anyway, this image on the screen is of one of our Black photo books and 2 LGBTQ photo books that we'll talk about a little bit later. So what you're seeing here, the brand name for these things is called a case box. We order them to size to fit our objects. We have them print the title on the box, and we have them print the call number on the box. So that's a way that we don't have to stick the actual call number sticker directly onto it. Also, these items, as I said earlier, they're not going to live with the rest of our rare books at the moment. So they're on our regular stacks, which were closed stacks. So they get a lot less like physical jostling than most other people's stacks probably, but they still get some. And if you think back to Lost that we looked at, that could really easily fall apart. So this is a little extra protection. And then you'll see over here, we have the barcode attached in the top corner. This one, it's hard to make out, but the barcode's actually handwritten on here. And that's what we do if something is received and we don't realize that it should be rare or processed as rare at the onset and make that decision later. It's fine. It at least saves us sticking some things on it, even if the barcode's on it. And we also add book plates that you can see over here to all of our items. So when we're ordering a box or some other enclosure for them, we just stick it on the box. There's also an RFID tag, but it's behind the book here, so you can't see it. So this is exactly how we would treat our rare items. We would get these boxes for them. We would stick all the stuff to the outside. So then it's just really easy once they hit the criteria to become rare, just swap them over. Don't have to do any reprocessing or anything. Saves us time. On the right, this one, we didn't have time to order a box for because somebody wanted to show it very quickly. So what we did was we encased it in a Mylar as you would for like a dust jacket. This is a hardcover, but we just put the Mylar around it, stuck all the stickers directly on the Mylar so that the thing itself was free of that if it wanted to be displayed or used in programming. Another enclosure that we do is build 4 flaps, which I don't have any pictures of. But my processing associate, Ariella Har-Evan, makes those decisions and makes those 4 flaps for me, which is wonderful because I don't have these skills. It would be a mess if I tried to cut a straight line. Okay, so this includes some images. These are both the LGBTQ photo books. So, building off how successful and how much interest we had with our Black Photo Books project, um, our acquisitions associate, Marcia Morrow, suggested that we should maybe look at another kind of marginalized identity to collect photo books in, because there's such a wide variety in that form. So we decided to start collecting LGBTQ photo books in late 2023. So there are fewer items available that we've gotten in for these, and it's still a growing collection. I won't bounce out to the catalog because I think everything is in here. It just is a little busy, but that's what we got. So again, I've got a tiny URL at the corner here, or a QR code at the top if you want to look on your own. It does basically the same thing. We have the same kind of uniform title set up so that we can group all the LGBTQ photo books. There's fewer of them, less than 20. I don't remember the number, but if anyone pulls it up, you can see on your own. You can also see, again, our locally assigned subject headings for LGBTQ photo books works the same way. We do have Homosaurus pull in here, so that's nice that that's included. Do I have anything else to say there? No? Okay. And then something that I would have shown you, but I don't feel like going through that process again, is that the Library of Congress subject headings we have on this one are LGBTQ people, Mexico, Mexico City portraits. And I think my other catalogers in the room might know that the LCSH subject heading for LGBTQ or queer people is not either of those things. It's sexual minorities. So let's try and replace that ingredient with something else, with something that's a little more useful, a little more friendly, a little less making me sad. Because as a sexual minority, it makes me sad. I don't like it. So I swapped out that ingredient and did a conversion. So much like 1/4 cup equals 4 tablespoons, which I had to check that was right. We can swap things out and we can still get the same beautiful result at the end. So on the left here, this is a screenshot of the bibliographic record, and you'll see that the subject heading is indeed Sexual Minorities, Mexico, Mexico City Portraits in here. On the right is a spreadsheet that is sort of like a translation table that we put in what the authorized heading is and then put what we want it to be instead. And what this does at this point is just masks what's there. So sexual minorities stays in the record. Sexual minorities is still what would be searched if you clicked on the subject heading in the record. And right now, if you tried to search for LGBTQ people, it wouldn't pull up as if it was sexual minorities. That's something that we're working on. I have to wait for a system update. So I'm at the hands of OCLC. But so this is just a snippet of this larger table that I created to mask some problematic terminology in subject headings. I originally did it focused on Indigenous people that we had in our catalog, and I swapped for terms that they use to refer to themselves, which if anyone is doing similar work, I've got a spreadsheet to show you by someone else who did fabulous work, Kim Ross at the Peabody. And I also switched terms about Asian people. Asian art in particular often uses an offensive word that I didn't want to necessarily have in there. So I did all that, and then a coworker remarked that I left sexual minorities. And I was like, oh yeah, I don't like that. That's mean about me. I can fix it. And I did. So if you have the power to do this at your institution, knowing a lot of you are in consortiums, a lot of you, there's a lot going on, change it for me, because it makes me happy to not have sexual minorities in there. So that was a bit of a tangent, but that is the end of my presentation. That's my cat Booker. It's his 10th birthday today. It's my sweet boy. I hope this was helpful. Email me if you want anything about photo books, about terminology. Happy to chat. And if there's any questions.
Questions?
So the translation table, what kind of, I guess I have two-part question. What is that you're using? Are kind of a little bit more outward. And why did you choose, and maybe this is a problem with OCLC, why did you choose not to add like an alternate subject?
Sure. So it's really system specific. OCLC rolled out an option that it's an Excel spreadsheet that has a bunch of other columns and rows, and it says like the which field it is, so 650, what the subfields are, what the indicators are, and then you put the exact subject heading and choose your replacement. So we could select multiple alternative headings as the replacement, but I wanted to keep it simple and just use this one that felt best to me. Because I could see it was a bit of a conversation about exactly what words we should use instead that kind of fell back to me as both the subject material expert and a queer person about town to decide what terms we want to use here. And I know a lot of folks in the community don't necessarily feel comfortable with the word queer on itself. So I just decided to go with LGBTQ plus people just to be safe on that end. And then hope that Homosaurus will also like supplement if there's any terms I'm missing. Does that answer your question? Oh, yeah. So the local subject headings, that's something that should be possible in most catalogs. I'm not 100% sure, but it's just a 690 field. So if you left it in like the master record, it would get wiped out. But if it's in your local, it should display. And then the second indicator 7 is like put in whatever you want to display. So I could have called it like Chloe's idea subject heading or anything I wanted. I just decided local would be something that patrons could understand easily should they have questions. I don't know for sure that they would read all the way down and read it to ask a question about it, but just to make it as clear as possible. Does that answer the question? Okay, great.
Any questions? Might be a dumb question. Apologize. Is this authority work, or does this kind of jive against authority?
I guess it's sort of. So something I didn't talk about in here, but that I do is I'm a member of the Gender and Sexuality SACO funnel, which is working with the Library of Congress to change and update terminology about basically any kind of non-heterosexual, non-cisgender person. So there's a few bits of authority going on here. I'm working within that standard established authority to try and make it more inclusive and change terminology. They don't love that all the time because there's a lot of like it's a domino effect of if you change one thing, then you have to change other things. So we've been trying to encourage them to change sexual minorities for a while. They rightfully point out the amount of work that that would be because it would just trickle down. So I am trying to work within that established authority, but then also I'm kind of creating a local authority. So it is like a local authority kind of work that I'm doing with this.
There's nothing that you would bring into the system for authority records that would overwrite your work?
No, so because I coded it as local, it shouldn't get overwritten by anything, and our system doesn't work that way, so it wouldn't be an issue. But hopefully, in other systems, you could do the same thing and it wouldn't be overlaid. But can't speak to that.
Any other questions? Once,
Mhm.
Do you have a like list of priorities of what you're wanting to do? Do you have any? Is there any? Do you do like how you set those for yourself or for your specific unit?
So do you mean like for the authority piece here at the end, or just like in general?
Actually, in that.
Oh, sure, sure.
We're saying kind of waiting on a system to upgrade and
Yeah.
be lowered, but we're debating about like what will come first.
Sure, sure, sure. So, can I get to the browser again? I'm sorry. You can see the whole spreadsheet. My priorities when I went about working on this was first, Indians of North America is an extremely problematic. I also, my background, I worked at a tribal college for a year and a half in New Mexico. So, I can figure it out. Getting to interact with those populations and having a student come up to me and being like upset that that was the words used in the catalog, and then having a conversation about like, oh gosh, like that wasn't me, but like obviously you think that it's me because you don't know who made these words and why they're appearing. So let me drive for a minute. Because as inclusive as I want to be and try to be, um the like as the cataloger, I kind of see myself as the voice of the library, and I control a lot of information about how people will feel and react to us. So I hold that in really um, I hold that responsibility really close to my heart. So I changed the headings for Indigenous people. I also changed the headings for undocumented immigrants, since that's something that was quite popular recently. Had a lot of communication from Dartmouth University. Um, and so that was something else that also like already had a preset alternative for me to easily swap to. And then so here's my big spreadsheet. It's big. So here's all of the like internal information, and then the heading as it exists in Library of Congress, and then the heading I want it replaced with. So all of these names of Indigenous people came from the spreadsheet that Kim Ross at the Peabody worked on, except in a few instances where it was not a group that was included. Then I went to their website or any other kind of information I had to put in what they call themselves. Because a lot of terms, recognize legal terms for people, are terms that another Indigenous group use to refer to them, and a lot of them are offensive. So I wanted to go out and see what terms they use for themselves. I wanted to take out the word Indians because, like, if you look at, say, French, like it doesn't say French people, it just says French. So we could just say Oglala, and that, like, I wanted to have parity in those situations. So this is all here. I'm happy to include a link to the original work that I went from in follow-ups, or also include this if you're interested. It of course will be a different situation in your own local system, but some ideas for where to get started. And obviously, there are omissions. There are things that could and should be here that aren't here, that I just don't know as a white cisgender woman. So always trying to do better, but those were my priorities when I started.
Any other questions? Yes, Laura.
I'm interested in the
Sure.
you got, and also wondered, and I'm sorry if I missed this in your but if you get those from like you order them and that's how they know the title, information, and what you're vendor.
Sure. So we use HF Group as our vendor for these. We use them for our bindery. We use them for a SureVault where we have offsite stuff. We've also used them for some like contract conservation because we don't currently have a book conservator and we have some stuff in rough shape but is important to keep and not anything I know how to do. So HF Group is our vendor for these. We will get the books in. They have like a formatted Excel sheet because all of librarianship runs on Excel sheets. And we, my processor will measure them. And we have like a special measuring thing that I don't know where it came from. But you can also just use like a regular ruler to give them the dimensions. And then she will go in the catalog and get the title exactly as it is in the 245. And then also the call number exactly as it is in the system and pop all that into the spreadsheet, send that to the vendor. Then they send us back these unfolded and we have a little like pizza box folding party, get them all going, match them back up. And it works really well. It's expensive, which I know is a problem for a lot of places, but our other alternative would be like creating the 4-flap enclosures, and that takes a lot more of her time. So this works out to be like cheaper for us and easier on everybody because we are understaffed, as most places are.
If I can tag on to that, when the cases come, they're pre-creased.
Yeah, they're pre-creased. They have like some little things you got to punch out and then fold into place. Oh, I have the cost of it in a spreadsheet. I can't tell you off the top of my head what it is, but like,
At my shop, we have a lot of things that really need stuff like that. And we've had some of the old back stock in one of our supply cabinets where we can fold them.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
They don't fit like that.
Yes. I can get you their price list. If anybody else wants it, it's in my Teams. It's not in my brain.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, I thought it was a little cheesy, so I'm glad that you liked it. I also like some of these things, especially like Casa Susana is about it's the first trans network in the United States from the 50s and 60s, and just like having that in my hands and seeing these women who were so brave and being themselves and like creating this place where they could be together and be themselves when it wasn't safe or legal in the country. Like that's so special to have access to that I wouldn't want to cover any of it with stickers. I want to be able to take my time with it and really absorb it and learn. But I have a lot of things in my backlog, so I can't do that much.
The Casa Susana book, was that a limited run?
I believe so. Most of them are.
How would you determine when it switches from a limited run to a rare book?
Sure, that's a decision that my acquisitions team makes, and you might know, but they have like a list of criteria that it needs to hit in order for it to be considered a rare book for us. Most of our books we do treat kind of like a special collection because we're a small research specialized library, so not the same way that you would want to get a new paperback quickly on the shelves at a public library, but so we do more for our books to try and keep them forever, which isn't always what you want to do in other situations.
I know before I left, I wrote some documentation about what to consider when making that rare decision. And it's really a case by case basis. But it kind of goes in order of like, well, what's the print run? What condition is it? How fragile is it? Sometimes it like something's even too fragile to go into a closed stack situation. So I don't know if you're able to share documentation if people are curious, but something existed.
That would be really helpful. At my shop, they had, it exists to me, but they had purchased through decades limited run classical literature, like, Tolkien, everybody. But they're limited run to like 100, 500 copies. And I just don't know how rare they are. They've done some strange things with them, like they refuse to put call numbers on them, understandable, but they put barcodes on them, which kind of made me scratch my head. If you're not going to put a call number on, don't put a barcode on. So I was just kind of curious of kind of how to oversee that collection and get it where it needs to be. So I might pick your brains.
I can connect you with our acquisitions guy, Dana. Oh, my CERC guy knew someone was going to ask about that. So let me go back to it. He told me, like, don't use that one. It says unshelvable. Someone's going to notice. It's fine. Most of our, you can't see it here, but it was this one. Most of our photo books, most of our items in TR range are, we did space planning a while ago. We got a photography curator after that space planning who is not afraid to ask us to buy stuff, which we love, but we didn't plan for that in our stacks. So our TR is not enough ranges to fit all of the books that we have. So we have some overflow shelving that we call the unshelvable stacks. Hopefully, we're gonna be able to make them shelvable because we are doing offsiting, but that's not my department. I just listened to my colleague Josh complain about it.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. I apologize. I apparently don't know how to tell time a little bit and started things a little early. Sorry. So we can probably, we have a afternoon snack coming up. If it's out there, okay. 2:45, 15-minute break, 3 o'clock. It's 2 o'clock. We might get out of here a little early. Do you want to? It's not there? Okay. So the afternoon snack is not out there yet. So why don't we just kind of bide our time for a little bit? And maybe we can circle back at 20 after. We'll see where we are at that point. All right. So it's a good thing we've got lots of good colleagues and fellowship in the room. We can have some conversations in that. And please forgive my inability to tell time. Don't tell my mother. All right. Good afternoon again. Again, I apologize for my inability to tell time, but the snack has not arrived yet, so it'll be here shortly. So what I think we'll do, let me know if you object to it. What I'd like to do is to go on with the presentation, with our final presentation, with and I should get my sheet here. And the snacks will arrive, and then we'll be able to wrap up a little bit early and take some snacks and have some conversation at the end and take some snacks on the way home. So how's that sound? Oh, all right. It is Friday. Getting out of a meeting a little early is not a terrible thing. All right. Okay. So you're all set, guys, aren't you? All righty. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Sandy Jalar Elwell and Libby McCune. Okay. And they're going to be talking to us about picture book categories. Okay. So there you go. Take it away.
Hi, I'm Sandy Jalar Elwell. I'm the Director of Technical Services of the Cleveland Public Library, and I'm going to present along with Libby about the assigning of picture book categories for our picture books at the Cleveland Public Library. So I have to remember what I have started here. So the whole idea of picture books came about as we started a facility master plan back in 2019. And that was to transition all of the picture books from being on the shelves into bins sorted by categories. But to get to that point took actually quite a few years, partly because of COVID and, not being in the library. So it started with us gathering information from the catalogers at the library and some children's librarians, as well as some of the managers in the branches that were going to be renovated. So we started gathering what possible categories we could use. But we knew too, with as much input as we got from those various different people, we were getting quite a range of categories. So we had decided that what we needed to do with the categories is that they couldn't be too broad, or they could be broad enough to cover several subjects, but not too narrow where there might not be any picture books that would fit into that category if, say, they were all checked out at that time. So we also needed to create labels that would coordinate with it. So we wanted it to be easy enough to manage them all. So working together and after several revisions with the staff I talked about, the librarians and the catalogers, we whittled it down to just 15 categories. And this is what the categories ended up being to get to the point where we had labels because it was too hard to find any vendor to purchase the labels from. We had our graphics department design the icon labels, is what we call them, to represent what each category was about. And as part of the process of deciding which categories to use, we came up with the description so it would be clear like what would fit into each category. Because there was a lot of discussion about where to put dinosaurs, or dinosaurs should be in their own category. So we kind of grouped that so it would be with the animals. I can't see without my glasses on. So that was like the trickier part, and having so much input too. Some people weren't happy with what went where, but we just wanted to try to make it really simple, because what it really was is trying to put the books so it's easier for kids to come in and browse and find what they want. Like they don't want to go look on the shelf by an author's last name to find a book about trains. They just wanted to browse through the bins for it. So this is the final list that we came up with, as well as each icon that it was created for it. So I don't know if it's easy enough to see, but part of my prop that I brought is, so this is the poster that our graphics department designed so that it's kind of like a finding aid for the parents and the kids when they come in, if they're looking for a certain thing, to find that in the bin. So every branch has several of these in their area with the picture books. Going to my notes too, because I don't want to forget anything. So, like I said, that the labels were designed in-house by a graphics department, but because of the magnitude of labels we would need, they were ordered from an outside printer. So this was the like first step in the whole process of getting to the picture book categories, though, because then the next step was trying to incorporate it into the workflow of technical services, such in regards to the cataloging. And the biggest sort of hurdle is because we are part of the CleveNet Consortium and we share a catalog. So we could not in any way edit the bib record to reflect what the categories were that we were going to use because that wasn't relevant for them. So I worked with the director of CleveNet at the time to come up with what would be the best fit to kind of accommodate our needs while still being able to put it in the catalog. So it was determined, and let me pull this up because I think this, okay. So, because most of you, I don't know how many of you are catalogers. So with the bib record, the call number appears against the item for each item ID, but you can go in and edit the call number for each item ID if you don't want it to be what's in the bib record. So that was our workaround to be able to put the category for each item that was a CPL picture book to reflect what we had assigned to it. So when we catalog picture books, we just, the call number is P with the author's last name. We just decided to put the category in front of it with a space. And we only did it for the picture books as we applied like assigned it the category, and we actually placed the labels on the book. And Libby's got a prop of some of the books that show how we apply the labels. So some of them kind of blend in depending on what the cover art is. So by doing this, we were able to put it in there for the books as they came in. So we started the process with there were 5 branches in what was in our phase 1, group 1 of our facility master plan. So originally we started that we were just going to do it for that group of libraries because they were getting bins as they were renovated or new construction and reopening. But then as of 2023, because it got too hard to manage just those specific branches, because some branches would have categories and some didn't, we decided to just apply labels to all the new picture books as they came through. And if they didn't have the bins yet, it didn't matter because they could still shelve them the same way that they had in the past, because we weren't changing anything about cataloging them. We were just changing that we would put a category as part of the call number. And the other part that made that helpful as well is with our ILS, if there's a hold, if it's on the hold reserve list, or if the patron gets a slip that they need to return their book, they can see where that book belongs, like where it needs to be shelved or to find it to fill a hold, if that makes sense. So this is one title, what was it? The Scariest Kitten in the World, that we did change all of the, it was cataloged so that it had the categories. As part of, so for the first group of branches, what we had decided to do with the collections was they discarded all of them to start fresh when they reopened. So, which we've changed. That thought process, that was out of my control. That was a property management, construction kind of, like they just wanted them out of the buildings quick. And Libby can talk because she was in one of the buildings, and this all started during COVID when we were closed up to the public. So they were just trying to like move forward quickly since they didn't have patrons coming in at that time with the renovations they had planned. So we had to do a lot of picture books to start with, like building up the collection for those the group 1A branches. But moving forward, we are now saving what we can from the collection up to a certain year, like 2019 current. So with everything new, it's automatically being assigned a category. But with branches that are closed up and save their collection, we're either having them send their picture books that are older to us to have categories assigned to them, or Libby's actually going to like our newest branch, which is it's a new construction, so they're still open and they're just moving to a new building. So she's gone out there three times to go and finish all the picture books that were older ones on their shelves. Let's see what I have. I want to make sure I'm not forgetting any steps. So yeah, like what I said, the only additional work then for catalogers at this point, because we wanted to streamline it, make it as simple as possible, was to assign the category. And then once that's done, then the only other extra work is our materials processing staff who already apply the spine label would just apply the appropriate call number category label to it. So I don't have much more. So I actually took pictures because I would go into the branches when they were setting up before patrons were actually there. So this was actually our first branch that reopened in October of 2022 was our Jefferson branch. So you could kind of see how the picture books are there. They haven't come up with, we're still working at because we have some new marketing going on where we wanted to put like dividers in the bins. So it kind of separates out what picture books are, sort of like how you used to look for CDs where it would be like some kind of divider sticking out. So you would know that they would be in that chronological order like animals, but then they'd be in their correct sections. So this was our Jefferson branch. And because there's different architects that sort of bid on all of our different branches, the bins are not all the same either. So that's kind of why I included these in here. So our Huff branch was a new construction that opened in November of 22. Sure.
Like at my branch, in the meantime, like this little graphic right here, I just printed out a picture of what the category was in that spot.
And so this was Libby's branch, the West Park branch. It opened in January of 23. This was our Lorraine branch that opened in the summer, June of 23. And you can tell like the differences with the picture books. The one problem is some of you probably have the Vox books, you know, like they're kind of larger and harder to fit into some of those spots. And then Eastman branch was just opened in October of this year. And then Brooklyn is our most recently open branch, which opened in March of this year. And we're currently, like I said, our Rockport branch is a new construction and it's scheduled, the new building is scheduled to open, I said June 22nd? June 22nd. That was it. So I'm going to turn it over to Libby now. Libby has a perspective of being in a branch before and after a renovation, and now she's in technical services.
I'm not doing it right. Share that window and then just click over to your next one. Is that right? Go back to the share screen.
Yep.
And then that one.
Window, then select it.
Select it.
And then go ahead and switch.
Good?
Yep. And then
Oh,
you want
great.
the slideshow button.
Okay, yeah. Okay, great. Okay, so like Sandy said, I have kind of a unique experience of having been a children's librarian before, working in the branch, and now being the person who's selecting the categories for the picture books. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how to do it. Oops. Okay, so pros and cons to start. Pros. It's easier to select the books on the face-out display. So you're not in a shelf where you have to pull out the whole book to see it. You can kind of just flip through them really easy. Like I said, I was at a branch at one of our newly opened branches, and so I got to see the parents and the kids looking through the bins. And I would often see parents just like grab the first book in a bin because they could see it and it was just easy to grab and they knew what category it was. That was the category they needed. So it made it a lot easier to just grab things quickly. It's easier for browsing. Book bundles were starting to be a pretty popular thing when I was still a children's librarian, where we just create like a bundle of 5 or 6 books of the same category and then parents could grab them really easy. So this kind of just replaces that and just gives you more options. The picture book labels help with any literacy issues. So because we have the picture on the label, if you're a kid and you can't read yet, you're an adult and you have some literacy issues, you can see pretty clearly what the category is without having to read it.
The lower shelves and the face out make it easier to grab them, like just from like a bending perspective. Like I used to be a page and I'd have to like kneel on the ground all the time and go through the books and ruined my knees. So it's just a lot easier to get to. And if the books are out of order, it doesn't really matter if it's in the right if it's in the right category, people will still find what they're looking for. Like I know from like an organizational standpoint as a librarian, I would go into the categories and put them back in the right order all the time, but they don't have to be. It's not the end of the world. Okay, so cons. Looking for a specific author can be tricky because they're not always going to be in the same category. So that makes things a little harder, but realistically, this just creates an experience as a librarian to help a patron. They might need to ask you for help, and that's a great opportunity for you to communicate with a patron. Convincing staff. I mean, that one's tough because when you say convincing staff, there's not really convincing because they just tell you they're going to do something. You just have to go with it. But as someone who was a children's librarian when they told us we were going to do this, I wasn't super happy about it to start. I had a lot of questions. One of the main ones was, how are we going to know what category it's in? And we solved that problem, like Sandy said, by putting it into the call number. So that was a big issue. I also think one of the big things that staff has an issue with is the books, like all the authors' books not being in the same spot. So that, I mean, that is a little annoying. But from my standpoint, having been a children's librarian, if I get a book in that I know it's a popular author, or let's say it's like Pete the Cat or something where you know that there's other books in that category, if it can fit in the same category, I try to group books together. And I also have communicated with all the children's librarians at our new branches to let me know if I missed something that could have been put together. So if they think a category is wrong, I'm willing to listen to them on why. And then another thing is just looking at the cost for the labels and shelving. The shelving, I think it's still convenient to have a label on a book because you can see the category, but if it's not in the shelves like that where it's easy for the kids to grab, I think it takes away from it a little bit. So it is best to have it in the kind of shelving we have it in. Okay, so moving on, how to pick the category. Number one, read the book. Now, I don't read every single picture book we get in, but at least browsing through the pages helps a lot. I think it's helpful to look at the 650s and to look at the 500 for like a summary, but that is not always going to work, as you will see when I get into an example coming up here. I also use Google or Goodreads sometimes for summaries. I get a lot of foreign lit books, so I use Google Translate to help translate the summaries sometimes. Sometimes if I can't find a summary, I'll take a picture of a page and I'll use Google Lens to translate it for me, and that helps a lot. Like I said, I already listened to your coworker suggestions. I already talked about that next point too. And lots of times, if it's really tricky for me, I will just put it on my desk and come back to it in like an hour, let myself like ruminate on it for a little bit. Okay, so I have some examples. This one is called Fruital. I don't have this book on me, so I can't like really show you anything, but this one is about birds. So you could think maybe animal category, but it's also about feelings and self-identity. And so it could be in our life category, which is feelings. So we can look at the 650s and it gives me the same exact categories that I already came up with. So, I mean, there's going to be some subjectivity here and you just have to pick what you think is best. Animals, I think this comes into play more than anything else because lots of animal books are about something more. So it could be animals, but lots of times it's more than that. So that's a good thing to consider. I do have this book with me, so I'm going to grab it. Somewhere. Okay. So this one is called Moving Up by Rosemary Wells. This one again, it has bunnies for animals. Kindergarten graduation could be school. Community partners could be community. But nowhere in the 650s does it say anything about community partners. But if you actually open this book up and read it, it's talking about what each of these little animals are good at and what they want to do when they grow up. So there's like a teacher one, a musician, a doctor. And so like the category that I picked for this one was community, for community partners. But like I said, nowhere in the 650s is that listed. So it's really important to really look through these books to see what they're about before you assign a category. It's not like going to be the end of the world if you don't give it the most perfect category, but we're trying to help patrons here. That's the end goal. So we want to pick the best category we can to help patrons find things. And like, really, you want to think, what is a kid thinking when they're looking for this book? What is a parent thinking when they're looking for this book? And that's, I don't know, that's the most important thing I would say. So sorry, I talk so fast. That's all I had to. Are there any questions? Yeah. So the one benefit is it's on the list. So the category it's in would show up at least. Now, I know when I used to weed things, I would usually edit the Excel sheet based on like what I was looking for. So I think if you had the categories in an Excel sheet, you could probably sort it by that and it would help. Yeah. So
Well, I was going to say, too, at this point right now, because I said that we did them for the first group of branches, they were all new books. So they haven't done a whole lot of weeding yet. And the ones that don't, the other branches are just, they're still on the shelf. So they're still shelving them the same way they were shelving them before, even though we're assigning the categories. But I mean, they're starting to weed some stuff off because even though their whole collection was new, as they get new stuff, and yeah, and unfortunately, the spaces for collections are much smaller now too, so they're having to weed more quickly.
So yeah, I mean, overall time, I mean, especially now at the beginning, like I just went to Rockport and I labeled all of their books, and that was probably like 10 hours of my time to go do all of their books. But the farther we go along, because we started labeling all the books, they'll already have a label. And like Sandy said, it's just our material processing people putting that picture label on. So I don't think in the long run, especially, it will be too much. But, mhm. Not in the main library yet. So this shelving is just going in as the branches are renovated. So there's, how many have there been now? Like 6 or 7? Yeah.
This might be the 7th one to open.
Yeah. So, like Sandy said, the ones that haven't been renovated now, their books are just on regular shelves like they were before, alphabetical order by author's last name. They'll just also have that label on there. And like I said, I was a little apprehensive when I first heard about this. I know my coworkers were too, because I heard a lot of other children's librarians talking about it. But I just got an email the other day from a newer children's librarian she's new to the system, so she didn't really know about what was going on. And she said, "Hey, I saw some of the books have this label on them, and I think it's great. Like, is there a way I can get them for all of my books?" So I feel like generally, once it's been put into action, we're seeing a good response from people. So, but yeah, eventually when all of the branches are renovated, they will have that shelving.
So the main library, what I'm trying to think of what they're even calling it, like renovation, is going to be after all the branches. So the facility master plan is over 10 years. So we're just finishing up the first part of it, the 5 years. So right now, the plans for main library, unless they change, is to consolidate some departments. We were out, part of the facility master plan too was a renovation for us and a move to a new building. So we used to be out over on Lakeshore Boulevard, and they've been in that building since 94. The Woodland branch, which I didn't have pictures of, was going to be a new construction, and they renovated the old Woodland branch for us and moved technical services into that building. And now we're called the Central Distribution Facility. And as part of that, they moved the shipping that was at the main library and in our building for like the new stuff. They consolidated, and we have an automated materials handler in our building. So the part of the plan with moving us from the building we were in is there's also the library for the blind was part of our facility. And when they consolidated the departments at Maine to move library for the blind to the main library, but it's a bunch of puzzles, pieces, and so forth. And I don't know how many people have been out at Lakeshore too. We have the stacks that is a lot of the older materials. They are putting in compact storage. They had to move our cafeteria that was on the 9th floor. So instead of just having compact storage on 7th and 8th floor, it's also on the 9th. And they've got this new compact storage that they can move all of the stuff from Lakeshore to the main library. So like there won't be any need to have to pull it from that facility. So part of, I think, what will happen with youth services will be depending on what happens at the main library. But I think there was like 600 books at Rockport that hadn't had categories that she had to go do. I ran a weeding list, which is only like stuff on the shelf, not anything checked out. And we had over 35,000 picture books. And out of the 35,000 picture books, that's at all our locations and at Maine, we had already put categories, assigned categories to over 11,000 of them. So.
For this, good. Because I was at a renovated branch, at a branch with very opinionated people, I will say. There was some negative feedback on some, like Sandy said, we have smaller collections now, and that has not been a positive feedback. But as far as the children's section as a whole, our patrons were really happy because a lot of our branches, West Park included, that's where I was at, the children's sections weren't like dedicated children's sections. So in my branch, we had a basement that wasn't really utilized. It just had some meeting rooms, and they transformed the whole basement into the teen and children's area. So we have a dedicated children's area now, and that's part of the positive response, I think. But I mean, from my perspective as a librarian, like it feels right to me to categorize them by author's last name. Like that feels right. Like it's just right. But that's not how normal people think. Like this really generally makes it easier for people. And like I said, if they can't find a specific item, that's just an opportunity to have an interaction with a patron, which is what we're trying to do. So. I am.
Well, I was going to say, it'd be kind of hard to do because pulling them up is hard to identify them because of the way they're cataloged. So right now, when I was trying to come up with how many picture books we have, because it's by an item type. So all our juvenile material are by like book J. So I can't run reports on just specific picture books because it pulls all the J, and just sorting out the picture books to see which ones have categories and which ones don't is a huge spreadsheet where I'm just sorting by call number and like, marking which ones are picture book, which ones are first, which ones are fiction, which are nonfiction. So the list I generated to find out how many picture books we had 85,000 titles on that. And that was trying to generate a list that included all of our locations. So we have 27 branches in the main library. So I'm not sure how I could figure that out other than working with IT to see how to identify it. But there's not anything other than the call number that's unique, but that call number is in that item barcode, not in the bib record.
I would say, as the person who saw what was coming back in, that I think maybe picture books were going out more. I think it's easier to just willy-nilly grab something when you at least know what the category is. You're like, okay, yeah, that might be good, instead of like needing to grab a book off the shelf and look through it. I think, and just with like story times right in the same area where the picture books were, I had parents just like grabbing stuff off the shelf. So I do think just what I witnessed, it seemed like maybe they were going out more.
So, I mean, we do a monthly report of like our circulation to see what it is for each location. And it's broken down by adult, juvenile, and YA. I mean, for her branch, because it reopened in January of 23, we could always go back and look at the difference and increase from what it was before it was closed to what it is now. But unfortunately, too, her branch was closed pretty much from COVID, 2021 on, and before that with being closed because of COVID. So we'd have to go back further before COVID to see what the circ was for her juvenile before we changed to the picture books. And even then, it, like I said, it summarizes everything juvenile, because it's too hard, because we're using the call numbers to distinguish between if it's a picture book or first.
I think too, like thinking about COVID when we were closed and we didn't have patrons coming in, I had parents all the time that would say, can you grab me 10 picture books off the shelf that are this? And so, I mean, even from that standpoint, it makes things easier for me. And I mean, like also for story times or displays, it made it easier for me to just grab books off the shelf. Before, I had like lists that I would create for myself of topics of picture books, but it made it a lot easier for that too.
So it sounds like with your branches, you have more of a high demand. I would be so curious to hear like a follow-up about how it sounds like your main library is much more of a larger collection, and what you do, whether you feed that collection down to make it a high demand collection, or whether, like, how you approach that to make it.
So with the main library youth services, we consider that more of like a branch when we select for it. So it does get all the popular. So whatever we're buying for the branches, we buy for youth services as well. They just might have more because they have more space. So on top of, like, we have a centralized collection development department that selects for youth services and the branches together. But each location has a little pot of discretionary funds that they could spend on each month, like adult books, juvenile books, and YA books, non-book, that's the only way that they would supplement their collection with things that weren't centralized, selected for them.
So the main library just has more books because it's so larger.
Yes. But there's not a different sort of selection, collection development policy just for youth services, because all those materials are circulating too. The stuff we have in the subject departments are the reference, but with youth services, it's treated more like popular, like a branch.
Yeah. I have a follow-up question.
Sure.
Because I used to catalog children's books at the public library, but their collection development was much more. They were not just a high demand collection. They were one in a consortia that kind of collected older books as well as, newer books. So I'm just curious what you would, if you would like recommend this style for a collection like that, or whether you don't think that.
Well, and I think too, like, Libby's more familiar with like the public service end of it, but like what I'm thinking about it with our main libraries, they do have all the award books, like that they do, like we keep all of those too. And like, to me, that would be the exception of things that we would not want to put categories on it if they were picture books. Have you seen, I mean, Libby, have you seen anything?
Not that I can think of.
I mean, I go here. I mean, I know I've seen like award books come through of some of the stuff. So when the branches that I said closed up, but they wanted them just to get rid of everything, I did come up with a list of like, please try to save like this minimum stuff. And it was all of the award books. I don't know if any of you bought the kids' books about something. there were all these different, like I had to sign an agreement that we could not discard them, and we had just bought them like at the end of 2019, so they were relatively new. So like I had like a list of like, can you please save this stuff? But and that's why I'm thinking, I know I saw these, but I don't know if they were picture books, if they were like just plain fiction. But we did save some of that old stuff because it, like it's out of print and because it had awards. But I mean, the main library hasn't had to like weed any of that stuff, and they would keep.
I will say, like, I don't know. I had never worked at the main library, so I mean, I know in some regards it's a lot different when it comes to browsing and stuff like that. So I don't know if it would be as useful for a main library collection as it is at the branches. I don't know how many people are going up to youth services every day to browse through books to grab picture books. I don't know if that's.
And I could say, Anisha Jeffries is the head of our youth services at the main library. She was one of the persons that I had go through the list to see if it made sense, because if we were going to do categories, like if they had like that, their collection was larger, that if she thought it made sense for the collection that she had, then it would be okay for the branches too.
And I mean, I get books like frequently enough that yeah, these aren't perfect, but they are. I think realistically for the books I'm getting, it's pretty close. I mean, like Tales is one of them, and that's like legends and lore and stuff like that. But I also put all of the like the unicorn books in that too, and it's not like specifically listed on our categories, but like what else, like mythical creatures, things like that. Like to me, Tales, that makes sense. And it's not specifically listed on any of them. So I've kind of made that executive decision to do that. But there are some books where it just doesn't fit perfect. And like I said, those are the ones where I need to think about it for a little longer sometimes. And I have had people tell me they think I'm wrong a few times. And like I will change it if it is, but I also won't if like someone recently was arguing with me on a picture book about Bible stories. And I was mulling over where I thought it went because we have a world section, which includes culture. And I was like, but we also have tales which is lore and things like that. And in my mind, religion, I think mythology, it has some connections there. And the person told me, oh, but this is true. And so you sometimes have to deal with, some different perspectives, and you have to think of what actually makes sense and what doesn't. And I decided to keep it where I kept it that time, but you have to like have an open mind, I guess.
Yeah, and that's why we've tried to have like one, like a designated department that is assigning categories, because if we let the branches do it, it would be like crazy. And so Libby's like the third person that's sort of helped with designating these categories, because when we had to do them for all the branches that closed up and we were getting all these new collections, we were what was it with 4 like locations that we were getting all new collections of all new materials that we just couldn't keep up with it. So there were 2 people working on just doing picture books because we just had so many. And then one of the persons retired, and Libby's filling in, took over that position. So for consistency, that's why we've tried to keep it to it's the same person, because otherwise you're going to have these arguments over, no, it should go here.
Another comment on the time portion too. Now that we've started putting in the categories, if we get a book that's already been categorized, I don't have to take the time to go through it. I just look, and another branch already has a category in it, so it just needs to be copy and pasted. So that more often than not is happening. So
the prop here. So once it's been assigned a category too, if you can see, this is the route slip that they put the category on a little slip on the top so that the materials processing staff know which sticker, and they don't have to look it up to find out what it is, because that would be the only other way. So as part of the whole facility master plan, we've been having like a rebranding, and part of the rebranding is different, like a specific font and color. So the graphics department was the one that the person designed like the icons for it. And I feel bad for her because they made her redo it like 3 times because they're trying to fit into like this branding thing. But then they wanted us to use colors that fit with the branding. And I'm like, little kids don't care that, like we wanted the colors to kind of be bright and like that catch their attention. So I try to persuade them to kind of coordinate like with the color palette that they gave me, that they like similar things were the same colors. So, oh wait, let me have it up here. And I don't know if you could see like, so animals and science, like brown, like that. I don't know. Do you know like that? Because they're kind of similar. And then of course, celebrate is like a catch-all because it's birthdays, celebrations, holidays, and tradition. So like all our holiday books, we've gone through lots of labels for the celebrate. And then families in life are green. Listen and rhythm are yellow. So I tried to as well because they're in alphabetical order. They were assigning them like the same colors right next to each other. And I said, when they're in the bins, they're just going to blend together. So we tried to kind of like make sure that there weren't the same two colors next to each other as well. Sure.
Any other questions? I've got one final.
So to connect back with Patrick's presentation this morning, do you think that the AI can help you describe your children's books?
That's a good question. I mean, in some regards, I would say yes, but there's still going to be like I was talking about. Yeah, yeah. Like I was talking about with how the 650s don't always line up. So if I tell AI, look at the mark record for this book and tell me what category it should be in, it could be right, and it probably would be right enough, but it might not be perfect.
Hey, ChatGPT, have you read this book?
Yeah.
And it'll be like, yes. It'll be like, can you analyze this book
Yeah.
for me?
I mean, realistically, yes, that could make sense. I mean, if we had some kind of code or whatever created, it would include what our categories were probably so that it could have a better chance of getting it right. So realistically, yeah, that's a possibility, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that how she was saying, like, depending on your perspective, you could disagree, right? And even just AI doing it, there'd be like you disagreeing just like you would disagree with another person, just like your perspective on it.
Yeah. And like I was saying, I know some of the children's book stuff well because I was a children's librarian. So if it's like an author books, I try and if they can fit in the same category, I try to do that. If we get a book in Spanish, I look it up to see if we have a copy in English and see if I put a category on that already so it stays in the same category. When I was doing the labels for our Rockport branch the other day, I got a book in paperback and it had already had an assigned category of animals. It was Interrupting Chicken and the Elephant of Surprise. And I saw animals and I was like, I really feel like I made that tails. And so I looked up the hardback copy and it was tails. So I made it tails and I just have to contact the two other branches that had it as animals and send them a new sticker. So it's good to just have all those things in the back of your mind to look out for while you're doing it. Yeah. So, I mean, our favorite section, like we do have kind of the prompts and the thing. So it says like classics, Disney, Seuss, superheroes. So like classics is, yeah, that's kind of like, ugh. And like there were some things when I got here that were already in favorites. And maybe an Excel sheet would be a good idea. Right now, I've been going off of, oh, I really feel like another book like that was in favorites. I should check that one first. So probably keeping some kind of record would be a good idea. But yeah, that's another one where classics, that's super subjective. So yeah.
Any other questions? My turn. So obviously CPL is a centralized cataloging operation. Yes. The branches don't have catalogers that do. That makes sense. One of the things I like about this organization is the public and the academic and the special librarians. A lot of this stuff I don't encounter in the academic librarian. Recently, I've been engaged with a curriculum library, children's library, and our biggest concern has been to reclass it from whatever configuration it was or classification that they came up with do to LC. Sorry, to LC. And our biggest concern right now is getting the stuff out of it, like the Hunter S. Thompson and Stephen King. I don't know why those came into our CRC, but so I'm kind of curious. I'm the records that I'm dealing with while I'm flipping our children's collection are the subject headings are fine, and I don't have a great desire to come up with these different sorry controlled vocabularies and stuff like that. Why do you only assign one category to each book?
I think from just like a shelving outlook, it would be complicated if it ran under 2 because we're trying to, like, in the way that we have the bins, we're keeping all of that category in like a bin. So I think that would just get a little complicated. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there definitely have been ones where I'm like, this really is this and it really is this. And I just have to make the executive decision.
I was fascinated by the religious encounter.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons why we're moving away from Dewey
Mhm.
to C. How did you resolve that? Do you expect it to come up again?
I mean, it certainly could. Yeah. I would say maybe based on the action I had with the person, maybe they think I have a standpoint that I might not even have, but they might have gotten an impression of how I feel about it. But from my standpoint, regardless of what any of my personal things are, I'm trying to look at it from like I said, where are patrons going to look for things? And yeah, there might be some patrons who look at that Bible story book and they say this is true, but I don't know, maybe the people checking out the Bible stories do think it's true. So maybe that's a good thing to think about. But yeah, I'm trying not to think of it from my own personal belief system, but just, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, kind of. And I would say those are 2 good examples. So if it's holiday, it's just going to be holiday for me. I make all of those celebrate. Like if it's got Santa Claus in it, it's going to be a celebrate book. And for the most part too, the concept books as well. Now I'm sure you've come across concept books that are like way more loosely concept books than others. So sometimes that could be something different. But for the most part, if it's like A is for this, B is for this, I'm going to put it in concepts.
Well, and the easiest category for us to sign is listen audiobooks because it's only Vox or what's the other one? Wonder Books. So technically the 14 categories in that one.
But it is a struggle sometimes. It really is. Like it takes me some time sometimes. That's why I said I'll just set them aside because like I don't want to waste like my whole day on trying to think of stuff. So I'll just like leave it and then try and come back to it.
Any other questions? Okay, very good. Thank you so much. It was a wonderful presentation. A couple of housekeeping things. Remember, we have the evaluations, the online evaluations. That helps us put on better and better programs. So please fill out the evaluations before you leave here. Again, it's on the QR code. QR code, I believe, that's on the table. Okay. And we're going to be all right, cool. Thank you, Nate. All righty. Like I said, I think one of the huge advantages to this organization is that we are a group of academic, public, and special librarians. And I think that's really key to the good work that this group does. Now, over the past couple of years, we've kind of had we've been a little top heavy on academic librarians. And I think that did us kind of a little bit of a disservice over the years. So over the past couple of years, we've been really focused on trying to recruit public and special librarians back into the fold to energize us a bit more. And these presentations, like Chloe and Libby and Sandy's, I mean, and Patrick's, it's stuff that I don't always encounter as an academic librarian, and I need to. I'll just give a little quick story. I work at the University of Mount Union, and for my career, I've always been an academic librarian. I've never worked in a public library, and I happen to work now with 3 other librarians that had significant careers as public librarians before they got into academia. And their perspectives about how to grow a collection, how to cultivate and steward a collection are very different than what I grew up with. And it's been really enlightening. So for example, one of the things was the color of the books. I never, ever, ever cared about the color of the books. I always cared about the text inside of the books. So if it's crumbling and dusty and gray and brown on the shelves, I didn't care. But a lot of people do, and I've started to realize that and to be more sensitive to it. Where and now I'm seeing the fruits of those labors. There's chunks of our collection that we've kept the book jackets, we've displayed the book jackets prominently. The colorful ones are right out there, and those are the ones that are leaving the shelves and circulating more than the old gray dusty books on the back shelves. So it's really kind of interesting. So I think that perspective is good for all of us. So if I spent my entire life as an academic librarian and had no interaction with public or special librarians, I'd be at a severe disadvantage for the people that I try to serve. So I'm really heartened by this last election. It came together. It was a little slow going at first, trying to recruit some individuals for it. But when I look at the results of the people that have stepped up to serve and to lead this organization, the people that were elected, we have 2 academic librarians and 2 public librarians, right? Robin, Aaron, Leslie, and Arpy. For those that didn't win, that we're going to invite as ad hoc members to the committee, again, 2 academic librarians and 2 public librarians. So that's really good. I think we need to get this synergy, and we need to get this communication together with all of us. So when it kind of stops and slows down and we become top heavy in one or the other, we kind of lose perspective. I like what happened today. We heard a lot of great presentations. I'm going to walk away with lots of ideas, and I'm probably going to bug some of the presenters for some pick their brains a little bit on some of the things that I'm working with, and I hope you all do as well too. So thank you very much for attending today. I think this was very important. We got out of those COVID years. We got a little too used to being on cameras and just looking at screens. So it's nice to actually sit in a room with people and have conversations and share food and so forth. So I've really enjoyed today. I'm very sorry that I do not know how to tell time, and I kind of flubbed up the arrangement a little bit, but I think it worked well. So right now the afternoon snack is out on the tables and all ready to go. Please help yourself to it. If you'd like to stay around and have some more conversations in that, I'm all happy about that. If you just like to get your snacks and go, that's fine too. So thank you very much for attending today and your participation. And you'll be hearing more from us in the following months as we plan for our fall meeting and our spring meeting as well too. And I hope all of you get involved with that as well. So thank you very much. Thank you so much to the board members. Thank you so much to the new board members and to our new ad hoc people. I hope you accept the appointment when you get those emails or those phone calls. And thank you very much. I appreciate it. Have a great journey home. Great safe trip.